Hello and welcome to Millions of Screens. As you can see this week, it is just Ben and I. Libby is out, and so will be a sadder pod, Ben?
Oh, it's much sadder. I don't know what I'm doing, what's going on. This feels so foreign and strange, and like I talk to you all the time, and yet this is just we're missing a limb. Like it doesn't feel right.
We're missing a limb and probably missing a brain?
Yeah, limb is the wrong word, but like Libby is definitely the most important appendage of the Millions of Screens team. So, oh boy, sorry everybody.
It's gonna be a wild ride. So strap in for this Libbyless Millions of Screens episode.
This is millions and millions of little screens.
Can't you shut up? I'm busy. Boy, what a great show.
We're skipping the clicker, Ben. Libby's not here. We're throwing the rules out the windows.
Listen, for one, Libby's always the one on the podcast who's like, we got to do the clicker. I don't know why you guys don't want to do it. This news is important. We have to talk about it. So now that she's gone, we're ignoring that wisdom. But also, TV stops when Libby's not working. So there is no news. So it's a win-win.
All right, Ben. So in a week, as you said, we'll know who the nominees are. But going into this whole process of phase one, what did you think? I mean, I know what you thought were the strongest contenders for potential nominees for Best Comedy Series. You had Marvelous Miss Maisel, Schitt's Creek, Curb Your Enthusiasm, The Good Place, Dead to Me, Rami, Better Things, and Insecure. And speaking for Libby, she had the same 8 with just a little variance on the order of 5 through 8.
Yeah, and it's honestly pretty surprising to me that we've come to an agreement on these 8 nominees because one, when we went into this year, we knew there was going to be a lot of turnover. Plenty of nominees from last year are no longer around. Veep and Fleabag are both gone. And now, Maisel's back. There's some new shows that are really trying to, barge into the field and steal some nominations. There's some
Barry couldn't finish its season, so Barry couldn't.
Barry's gone. So because of all the turnover, it seems like just about anything can happen. And I do think that still kind of toward the bottom of that category, it feels like, a few things could move or slip in and out. The Kaminsky method is something that people are still pretty high on. Some people have a lot of faith in The Great on Hulu. Space Force is something that was very well seen and has Steve Carell and a big cast and Netflix behind it, so that won't go away. And yet it still also feels like a lot of the shows that you just mentioned are just too hard to argue against. Like, it just seems like Insecure had a really good season, and that it was always one of those shows that was sitting right on the outskirts if it didn't quite get in, so now it's the time for it to get in. Better Things, has been on the cusp for a while. It's very well liked within the industry. It's been growing since it was available on Hulu. Dead to Me is very popular. Rami has had a big year in its second season, had a big year for its first season after the Emmys. So it's weird. It's like something is going to shake this category up, I think. I don't expect to be 8 for 8 on this, but it's hard to guess exactly where it's going to come from.
Well, why don't we talk about the 4 that you and Libby were locked in on, the top 4. Obviously, you have Maisel there. It won 2 years ago and then was sort of upset by Fleabag last year. A lot of people, you actually in your column mentioned that, like, what is this year's Fleabag? And could it be Schitt's Creek? There's a lot of sort of noise around Schitt's Creek right now in terms of it potentially upsetting Maisel.
Yeah, and I feel like, and we talked a little bit about this last week too, but I feel like that's something that's almost been manufactured around the show by the people who are really passionate, like that relatively small cult fan base that's grown a little bit in the final years, really wants to believe that for its final season, people will rally behind this and give it a shot. But Maisel is an absolute powerhouse. It's something that has only really gained steam since it won the category 2 years ago for its first year. It did very, very well last year, facing something that was just an unstoppable force. So to think that it's going to, suddenly drop off or become a second fiddle to anybody in its third year round, like that just seems like a stretch to me. But I like the campaigning around it. Like, I like the idea of, a spoiler of Schitt's Creek that is sitting right there on the edge and is kind of the pop TV underdog to Amazon's Goliath, and to mix metaphors a little bit. But at the same time, I'd love to see something like Curb get some recognition. It's had a fantastic season, and I think people really do like it a lot, and Larry David has been front and center throughout, the pandemic, kind of with his own interviews and photos that have gone viral, and it's just a great show, and we love comedies, and there's a lot of good ones this year. So I feel like it's those top four. The Good Place and Dead to Me might switch in nominations count. Like one might do better than the other. Rami could end up having a really big year and kind of usurping some of, like, getting its way into the top slots. But definitely Maisel, Schitt's Creek, and Curb are pretty solid.
You mentioned that that Schitt's Creek would be nominated for its final season, as would the Good Place. What of those other the ones that are in your spoilers and you're in your perfect world? What other, on the outside looking in, final season shows? So Silicon Valley, Modern Family, Baskets, Kidding now.
Kidding, yeah.
In between last week's pod and this week's pod, Kidding second season may have become its final season.
Yeah, it was canceled. It does not look like anybody would pick that up. So,
which of those shows do you think has the best chance of sneaking into the field?
I'd have to say Modern Family, if only because it's such a legacy pick that it was so beloved for so long during those first 4 or 5 seasons that, you can never fully count it out, and there could be a resurgence for that final year. But with a lot of shows, especially at the Emmys, unless it's something that they came to a little bit late, the final season doesn't make as much of a difference as people want to believe it does. It's not like there's going to be a resurgence of enthusiasm. And I always think, especially with Modern Family as a good parallel, Mad Men is just the exemplar here. Like, it did very well for its first 4 or 5 seasons. It became this juggernaut, and then they were like, okay, we're good. Like, we've done that enough. There's new shows. We're going to move on. And they very much treated Modern Family in the same fashion. So I don't think that'll kind of come back. Silicon Valley was one that never really got to that same level. And it also just faded in a way that it felt like it was less and less relevant as each of the final few seasons went by. It also had a long break between its, like, I think its 5th season and its 6th season, or its second to last and its last season. So it'd be pretty surprising to see that one get back in the field. Kidding obviously never made much of a difference, but I think Baskets is one of those things where I would be shocked if it got into the comedy field, because it ended a long time ago. It never really broke in this regard. But it could make some hay for, like, supporting actor, like we talked about in the past, like Louis Anderson, who's just very well liked, and the category's been expanded. So, like, it could still get some recognition. Modern Family could still get some recognition in the acting categories, which it was always successful in. But no, I think that those would be pretty tough sells. Honestly, I think if there's going to be a surprise from outside of the ones we've already mentioned, it would be...
I think I know where you're going with this.
It would be FX's What We Do in the Shadows.
That's not where I thought you were going with this.
Where do you think I was going?
I thought you were going to Netflix again.
What, Space Force? I mentioned that. We talked about Space. It's in there. Space Force could happen. Okay. I'm the only one who'd be happy to see it happen, but it could happen. No, I think Space Force has a good shot, if only because it was very well seen and people like Steve Carell kind of no matter what. But What We Do in the Shadows is definitely one of those things that elevated from something that people really liked and respected, got good reviews, saw a lot of potential within for that first season. And season 2 is just, no, this is elite now. Like, this has really become the funniest show on TV. So if we're just looking for something that's really, really funny, and we're going to ignore some of the, the grander ideas, or, the drama that gets sneaked into some of these hybrid shows. If we're just looking for laughs, then What We Do in the Shadows would be in the top 5. But because it didn't have as much success in the first season, that means it's harder to break in season 2. But this is still the kind of thing where if enough people caught up with it, then it could surprise people. It could sneak in, which would be great. Taika did a great job. Jermaine did a great job. The whole cast is wonderful. So that'd be fun. And that's, as I think we talked about this last week too, but like, just for all of us, this is a category that when you look at the In a Perfect World picks, like when you look at the ones that really aren't in consideration, aren't in competition, that have kind of been counted out, it's an incredible class of comedies. And then the ones that are kind of favored there's a mix of really, really strong stuff and stuff where you're just kind of like, well, this is just the TV Academy's taste. So there's a world in which a perfect picture emerges on Tuesday morning, and a world in which that picture is just terrifying upsetting, and we all scream for days.
For those who don't have access to the document that Ben and I are looking at, or Ben's, you do have access to the internet, I'm assuming. You can look at Ben's comedy series predictions, his In a Perfect World grouping. And I'm just going to throw What We Do in the Shadows in there, even though it's in spoilers. This would be a pretty insane 8 if you did What We Do in the Shadows, Glow, Kidding, Baskets, Dear White People, Vita, Los Spookies, Sex Education. So did I do 9? I did 9. Whatever. Sex Education, and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
In.
We're doing 9 shows. But I mean,
it's worth noting that I just can't believe It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia has never gotten like a big nomination at the Emmys. It's gotten like a couple of the smaller creative arts nods, but like none of the actors, none of the writing, and obviously not for comedy series. And it's fantastic. So I don't know if that day will ever come, but boy, that would be a nice surprise. That would be a perfect world.
Well, Ben, do we want to talk a little bit about, obviously there's sort of, I mean, you do have the list of what was submitted for directing and writing, but they're obscenely long. But just if you wanted to throw out, what do you think is sort of a guarantee, if you will? A very general guarantee. Like to say, Maisel will be nominated for writing or directing. And then something you really would like to see celebrated in some way or nominated.
Well, in terms of directing, I mean, I think that, again, like you mentioned, Maisel is pretty much the one that we know is a lock. It's something where it got 2 nominations last year, but lost to Fleabag, mirroring what happened in comedy series. But it won for its first year. Like it only got 1 nomination, but it won for that nomination. So I would kind of expect to see a similar showing where it gets at least 2 nods.
Fleabag swept series, director, and writer for last year at the Emmys.
Right. And again, like Fleabag was just an unstoppable force. And I know that people want to make Schitt's Creek out to be that of this year, but that's just not, like, there are not enough parallels to justify that comparison. I will say that I feel like Curb Your Enthusiasm will probably get nominated when it comes to directing. It's done pretty well in the past, though it's been a while since it actually scored another directing nomination. But it won in 2003 when it was actually nominated for 4 different episodes. In 2002, it got its first nod. It was nominated for 3 again in 2004, again in 2006, and then 2012, it picked up a nomination. So it's been a little bit since it happened, but also this was a pretty solid season, so that one looks fairly strong. I wouldn't be surprised to see kind of whatever the nomination leaders are emerge as a favorite here. So if Schitt's Creek really does gain some steam, perhaps it could get its first directing nomination, though I think that's a fairly long shot. Good Place could sneak in, even though that hasn't happened yet. And I would love, personally, as we've talked about a million times, and is no secret to anyone, to see Pamela Adlon get nominated here, because her directing is just magnificent. It's a show that is constantly surprising, handles tonal changes so incredibly well, gets inspiration from a million different places, and incorporates it into this one very understandable and relatable program. So I think it would be ridiculous if she didn't get nominated this year. But Rami also feels like one that is probably right there, where if it's going to have a good year, you'll see some nods for directing.
Well, Ben, before we move on to a brand new segment we're going to be debuting.
Ooh.
That's how I tease that. Do you want to talk about a potential writing nominate? Well, what do you think is definitely going to get in for writing? 1 or 2 shows that you think will be celebrated, and then what's something that you do really want to see enter the writing nomination grouping?
I think, as you mentioned, one of the interesting things about last year was that Maisel didn't get in for a writing nomination. I think that was just a kind of there were just too many good shows. Like, there's just too much competition. And now that it's lightened up a little bit, I think Maisel will be fine. They're the leader in the category, so they'll find a way. Good Place is something that was nominated last year, and I'll find another way in. But the rest of them are all not really in consideration. Fleabag, Barry, Pen 15, Russian Doll, and Veep are all out. So that opens the door. I think this is something where we'll see Schitt's Creek get recognized. if only because, it's very much geared around the writing more than the look of it. Like it's the family and how the cast comes together, and orchestrating that can be rewarded from the writing branch. I think Dead to Me probably has a pretty good shot. Netflix has made a pretty strong push around Liz Feldman, so I'd feel pretty good about her. And again, like with Rami Youssef, it's one of those things. If they respond to the show, then it seems like a lock for writing. If they really do embrace the second season of this Hulu comedy, then it'll be here. Like it'll be in the writing as well. But if it's something where they're kind of just in and out on it, where they say, okay, we'll give something to Mahershala, we'll give something to Rami, we'll give something to kind of a creative arts here and there, but it doesn't get comedy series, then it might not get writing either. Better Things is kind of in the same boat for me. I think if it gets comedy series, it'll get a writing nod, it'll get Pamela Adlon, it'll get a couple more creative arts things. But if it misses out on series, then it'll fall off again here. So that's the big one for me is Better Things. I would also give a huge shout out to Glow. I think Glow is one of the best written shows on TV. It's amazing how well they've kept that story going over the course of its first 3 seasons. And they like the episodes themselves are so strong, but then the overall story continues to develop in really exciting ways. So I would love to see that happen. I'd love to see Kidding as well. I'd love to see Sex Education get recognized now that it's in the proper category. That was something that got shoved into drama last year where it didn't belong, and Netflix finally made the case and got into comedy this year. So that would be nice. But yeah, I kind of expect to see more domination from a core group of shows than spreading the wealth like last year. So
last question from me. So Mythic Quest had that quarantine episode. Did they submit that for anything?
They submit that in a different category. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I think it's a variety special or something.
Okay, because I just know that like if I were a voter and I saw that, because that definitely was innovative in so many ways, that it should probably get some kind of recognition.
Oh, they did submit. Wow, you're right. They did submit Quarantine for writing. They considered it a special episode, but it still qualified because it was it was the 10th episode of the season is how it appears they're structuring this. So
this is my Leo Garcia out on a limb prediction. Mythic Quest Quarantine Edition.
Love it.
We'll get a nomination in writing for Rob McElhenney, Megan Gans, and David Hornsby. That's me.
Wow, and oddly enough, it's the only episode they submitted for directing.
Boom, it's going to get both nominations. Calling it now.
That'd be pretty sneaky. That'd be pretty good. I'm surprised.
I can't wait to be wrong about this, but I think I can see this happening.
Or you're a legend. I mean, one or the other.
I mean, I just think I saw a lot of like heat and noise around that for them doing. They were the first one to try it in a way that wasn't a talk show. They leaned into Zoom, but did it in a way that made sense for the show.
Yeah, and they were one of the few who were actually hailed for kind of striking the right tone and crafting it in a way that didn't overly rely on Zoom jokes and grounding it in that sense of time. Like you knew when it was happening and why it was happening, but you were able to kind of engage with the characters outside of it. Plus, Apple spent a ton marketing that thing. They got Barry Jenkins to talk to Rob McElhenney. So, I mean,
I'm telling you, that's my out on a limb pick, which is I guess a new thing we're coining. Hopefully, we can sell it to someone. Brought to you by Arby's. Leo's out on a limb pick.
Man, you just made my dinner planning a lot easier.
And speaking of out on a limb, since we're without a limb, no Libby Hill. After this break, we're coming back with a special guest.
That was an amazing segue.
So obviously, Libby is out this week. So we decided to break open a new segment since we can't have Libby ask us, is Quibi dead yet? The answer is not yet, but soon. So we have this new segment based on when Steve was last on the podcast. He was so great about recommending things to us. So we decided to have Steve Green, the recommendation machine, on the pod. And Steve, this was your idea. We're going to give you a minute to recommend something and then make as many salient points as you can. And then Ben and I get to ask follow-ups after that minute is done. So a minute on the clock, starting now.
Great. I'm here today talking about Dare Me, which is a show that premiered on USA earlier this year. It premiered in a dead zone between New Year's and the first week of 2020. But I'm here to tell you that even though the show did not get picked up for a second season, it is absolutely worth your time. It's based on an incredible novel by Megan Abbott, co-showrun of the show with Gina Fattor. Steph Green, if you liked her work on Watchmen, she directed the pilot. It's a dreamy slice of life in a sort of unnamed Midwest town.
30.
Centered on a group of high school cheerleaders. And it starts out as sort of a drama that morphs into something that's more like a psychological deep dive into the lives of three women. One is the cheerleading coach, and 2 are the other cheerleaders on the team. The cheer sequences are great. It's very physical acting, a trio of amazing central performances.
Boom. 59 seconds. Steve.
Whew.
All right. Ben, do you have a follow-up for Steve on Dare Me?
I have one very important immediate follow-up, which is, how do you watch this show?
So the first 3 episodes are available on the USA app if you want to purchase additional episodes, which I would say they're absolutely worth your money if you choose to go that route. If you want to watch the rest of the season, they are available to buy at other locations.
And not on Peacock.
Get on that, Peacock. You got some great content that your subscribers are missing out on.
Is it like cheerleading Riverdale?
Executed a lot better. I think in Riverdale there's a sense of kind of accidental camp that then the show really leaned into once people responded to that part of it more. Mm-hmm. I think in talking to the creators and the co-showrunners of the show, they definitely invoked the name Lynch many times. I think it's not a coincidence that like Blue Velvet is something that they referenced a lot in the writer's room and in the sort of production process. And I think it earns that in the best possible way. It takes a lot of the best sort of looking at sort of the underbelly of a taking a look at people who present as like the ideal sort of American dream, in this case, like your top high school cheerleaders, and sort of looking at what's underneath that and what's kind of underneath the surface that people like to present to the world. And there are these really great abstract sequences that open each episode as a way to kind of set the mood, but also subconsciously kind of tease what's coming. And you don't really realize at the moment, but then in hindsight, you realize, oh, that's what it was kind of leading you towards.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for being here for Steve Green, the Recommendation Machine, a segment that bears your name and nom de plume that I gave you, your nickname.
A moniker that I wear with absolute pride. It's one of the nicest things anyone has ever called me, and I will be happy to earn that name in perpetuity if so asked.
Well, we'll welcome you back in subsequent weeks when Libby is back on the pod. But thank you so much for the recommendation. Millions of Screens is a production of the Penske Media Corporation and IndieWire. Our theme music features excerpts of the classic YouTube video Bjork Talking About Her TV and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Our editor-in-chief is Dana Harris-Bridson. Our publisher is James Israel. And our executive editor is Ann Donahue. Our favorite TV shows starring a character named Libby include Lost, Andy Mack, and Shortland Street. I've only seen one of those.
I mean, one of those is from New Zealand, so
okay,
have to dig a little deep. But
our favorite on-screen Libby is Chris Evans interviewer Libby Hill, and co-podcast host.
Oh, that's right, she does that too.
Yeah, co-host of Millions of Screens, Libby Hill.
I forgot. I was just so associated with Chris Evans.
Yeah. You can find us on Twitter at Million Screens, at Midwest Spitfire, at Ben T. Travers, and at Leo Adrian Garcia. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, so leave a review and let us know what you think. This is Ben and Leo reminding you, as always, that you shouldn't let poets lie to you. I'm sure Libby is also reminding you about that right now.
I hope she's thinking of something entirely different. Like a guy unrolling a tarp on a baseball field.
Yes, I hope she's thinking about baseball tarps.
You shouldn't let poets lie to you.
Ain't nothing wrong with a couple of cold brews and a cool podcast.